You're on Sunshine's Table Talk with me, Leah, and I have the pleasure of chatting now to the wonderful Kavitha Emmanuel from India, I believe. Are you in India at the moment? You just came back from Dubai?
Yes, I'm back in India, and yeah, I had a great time in Dubai. Yes, I'm in India
Amazing. Amazing. And I'm talking to Kavita. A part of obviously it's International Women's Day was on Wednesday, and then all this week we're talking to incredible women who are really doing wonderful things in various industries. And Kavita is coming to the Flourish conference as part of Advancing Women in March. But I wanted to have a chat to you prior to that so that you could be a part of our International Women's Day week because you've got a wonderful bunch of sort of innovative change, disruptive organisations. One of them is the Women of Worth movement. So I thought we could
now.
start there with our conversation. Can you give us sort of an insight into the Women of Worth movement and how it all sort of came about?
I just want to start by wishing all the women out there wonderful, happy, and blessed International Women's Day. I hope you have a great year this year.
Beautiful.
I just was part of an event of Women of Worth yesterday in one of our communities, and I was so blessed just being there and watch my team do the program. So, in terms of my story and the story of Women of Worth, they're sort of one and the same.
Mm,
It starts way back when I was a child growing up in a family. I grew up in a very small town here in Tamil Nadu, India. My family taught me the values that affirm, that all human beings are made equal.
mm.
And I saw that practiced in my home. But when I walked outside of my home, I just saw that women were being treated poorly for some reason. And in my young mind, I kept asking, why is this so? If I'm equal and God made me in his image, why is this so? I would see men drag. I'm sorry, this might sound a little dark. I've seen wives being beaten, and
Wow.
nobody could interfere in my culture at that point because we didn't have laws against domestic violence,
Right.
and the men would that it was the man's right to do what he wanted to his wife and so on. So this kind of sort of disrupted me and the way I thought about who women were, and I didn't realize for one moment that God would raise me up to do something
Yeah.
to be the voiceless here in my generation. But yes, issues of gender injustice, issues of caste injustice and
Yeah.
class were right before my eyes. And as I grew up in my teen years, it began to affect me as a person because I realized the world doesn't see me the way I saw myself or the way I
Wow.
thought God saw me. And then I needed to find out for myself what God really thought about me. That's when I began to read the Bible for myself. And I realized, though the Bible is set in a very patriarchal setting, it is still the most inclusive book that I can ever find.
Yeah.
As I read it began to change my perspective of myself and my perspective of the world. And then when, yeah, I grew up, did my university and all that, I was part of a church planting initiative along with my husband. And then we realized we have to do something to, respond to the needs of women in our
Mm.
society. And that's how Women of Worth was birthed as a non-profit initiative. It's me and a couple of other women who are on the same page as me, who've experienced some of the things that I'm talking about. We started Women of Worth as a movement here in Chennai, India.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that would have just been a really sort of quite confronting and horrific experience growing up to see, yeah, women treated in such a way that is so different to your home life. Did you have a lot of conversations with your parents about sort of why is that happening outside and that difference, or was it something that just wasn't talked about?
I did talk about it a little bit, but what I did see for me, I think what we catch is often way better than what we are taught or
Yeah,
spoken to. So I saw always my parents sort of interfere, and because my parents were respected in the community, and so they were leaders, because they ran a charitable school there, so they
right.
had voice, and so they could interfere and sort of bring peace into families and be done. What we remember much of it, but I'm sure was more important.
Amazing. We're going to continue the go anywhere. We'll be right back. So, the theme for International Women's Day this year is Embrace Equity. And all week we've been talking to women and asking the question, what does embracing equity look like for them? And I suppose before the conversation has always been around equality, but we really are moving into this okay, let's actually define that it's equity that we want because equality isn't actually end up being fair or provide justice for all. So, Kavita, I'd love to know what does embracing equity and what does equity look like for you, and what would it look like, in the areas that you're working in?
I like that you've chosen the word equity because in contexts such as ours, it's equality sometimes confuses people. You know, it's not giving people the same thing, but it's about ensuring that people have access to the same thing. And
Yeah.
very often, women don't have access to the same opportunities and same privileges. Privileges are often one-sided. Men have it because society says it's okay for meant to have it, and even when it comes to issues of injustice and violence against women, we find that often culture sort of sanctions it. It's understood that sometimes men can have that one-sided privilege, and that is accepted. So equity is about telling those who've been exposed to harsh realities and inequalities that they have human rights. So for
Mm,
me, equity starts with emphasizing that human rights and voice and equal opportunity is everybody's right. And if you've been denied that for a long period of time, and society is tilting towards privilege to one side of the spectrum, I think
mm,
it's time to sort of swing the pendulum sometimes to the other side, which I would call as positive discrimination, which means that women need in sometimes more than what you give to men, or more than what men have access to.
yeah,
It's like
right.
the picture you see of equity, right? The tree sort of has to be a little partial to women so that they rise up
Yes.
to occupy an equal space with men. So for me, having said that, I would say that equity or equality is about mutuality, really, and that also something that I know the whole world has recognized. It's not just enough to speak to women about equality. It's about, I believe, I choose mutuality and partnership between men and women over polarizing. It's
Great.
about working together. And when you're talking about equity, men are part of the conversation.
Yeah,
If they
true.
are there, we're not going to get anywhere. And the whole thing is that when you're talking about gender equity, it benefits everyone, not just women. And so, yeah, I choose partnership over polarization,
Yeah, I
and
love that.
creating a new culture, a new culture, a new way of life where everyone has access to what they need to flourish.
Yeah,
That's why I love the name Flourish, what I'm going to come to. And yeah, Flourish is about, does everyone have what they need to flourish to their fullest, so that
absolutely.
would define equity for me.
I love that. I think that's a great way to look at it as well, because it is not just about putting one person over the other. It's bringing everyone up to the same level, whether that means that one person needs more assistance versus the other person. But I think yeah, that whole we need to be able to support each other to do that. And speaking of supporting each other, and I guess a way to bring light, as another one of your causes is the Dark is Beautiful campaign that started in 2009 and went viral 4 years later on social media. And I think this campaign I just absolutely love, and I think it really leans into as well tackling a lot of biases you've got first of all for women, but then the biases that then and challenges that also come as a person of color. I think is then another layer on top of that. Can you tell me about the start of that campaign, Dark is Beautiful? And did you ever sort of expect it to just blow up like that?
No, no, that's the interesting thing. This is not something that I dreamed of,
Yeah,
that I would be doing. It just happened because in our work as women of worth, counseling young women, the issue of skin color kept surfacing. I live in the south of India where people are darker than those you would find in the north of India.
Okay.
So, but the issue of skin color bias, we didn't even know a word like colorism existed then.
Yeah, wow.
But the issue of skin, yeah, so the issue of skin color bias kept surfacing, and I thought India was probably the only context where this is so, kind of harsh. And girls would come up and say, in our counseling sessions, I'm not good enough because I'm dark skinned.
Oh,
And then it kept surfacing. And even within our own working team, women had stories where they would not find dating, they could not
yeah.
find boys to date. Of course, dating was not so common in our culture. Then But even with marriage proposals, there were a lot of rejection. And the thing in India, we realized as we thought about it more, when people go to see the birth of a newborn child, they just go to check two important things. One is the gender of the baby,
Yeah.
the sex of the baby. If it's a boy, wow, this is great. Your God has blessed your family. If it's a girl, don't worry, your next one will be a boy. So
Oh,
first, the sex of the baby. The next one, the very next thing is the color of the baby.
wow.
And if the baby happened to be a girl and dark skinned, oh my goodness, you have to do something, give her beauty
Oh,
treatments and
no.
stuff, and save up a lot for her marriage later, because you may have to give a lot because she's dark skinned. And so, yeah, so this is still a
That,
very common narrative,
oh,
although awareness has begin is around. And we were thinking, why isn't anybody speaking about this sort of
yeah.
inequality and injustice, skin color injustice? And one story that really pushed us to start was the story of one of our teammates. She used to come to our church, and her name is Sapna. And so she is dark skinned and very beautiful, very accomplished. But every proposal that came, they would reject her, saying that she's too dark. And there
Oh,
was this one proposal where there was this doctor from UK who was on a wheelchair for some reason. But my friend Sapna said, that doesn't bother me. I'm happy to overlook his physical challenge, and I'm willing to consider, all I'm going for is his character and his nature.
mm.
And the families meet, and Sapna never hears anything about the proposal later. And then she finds out that the groom's family told her that she was too dark for her,
Oh,
for their son.
wow.
I'm like, oh my God, this is like, crazy. And that's when we decided, let's do it. We were a
Yeah,
very small organization, but then we thought, let's just do it. Let's just see how people respond. And so we launched the campaign in a very small way in 2009. And we were amazed at the response we got from people left, right, and center. And we were like,
absolutely.
wow, this is something that people want to hear. I would say one of the reasons the campaign went
Yeah,
viral is because people had a place to talk about something that they did not have a place to even express earlier.
absolutely.
So I think it's people who made the campaign go viral. What we did was so negligible, but people responded to that call, the wake up call.
No,
And here we
absolutely.
are today still talking about
I
it.
know. And I
So,
mean, I think it's still so topical and so relevant because,
yeah,
I mean, it's just a conversation that needs to never stop happening. And I know, especially
absolutely.
here in Australia, there is a lot of prejudice against First Nations people, and they experience a lot of, yeah, racism and prejudice because of their background, and unfortunately, it's not an equal conversation, and they don't have a seat at a lot of tables where they should. And I think this is why conversations like this and campaigns like this, Dark is Beautiful, is so important. And yeah, yeah, it's so wonderful to talk to someone like you who's just like, okay, here's the problem. What can we do about it? And I think yeah, we need to go to a break, but we're going to come right back with Kavita, and we're going to talk more about Dark is Beautiful and also the conference that is coming up in March as well. So don't go anywhere. I am talking to Kavitha Emmanuel, who is the founder of Women of Worth movement, and is going to be in Perth and Australia for the Flourish conference in March. And we've been talking about her Dark is Beautiful campaign that was started in 2009 but went viral 4 years later. And I guess I wanted to talk to you more about this idea of biases and sort of confronting bias in ourselves, and because essentially that's what these sorts of campaigns is doing, right? It's having that place for conversation for people who don't feel like their voice is being heard, and then hopefully also starting a conversation with people who may have been tapping into an unconscious bias or maybe a deliberate bias and treating people unfairly. Um, but are you finding that that campaign and the other sort of your movement, Women of Worth, has been tackling a lot of biases and being able to move the dial, hopefully away and a way of people getting a bit more educated on what it's like?
Let me start with the good news that yesterday in one of our national newspapers, there was an ad by a brand that, said like we have to embrace all skin colors and here's a product. Of course, they're selling their product,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
at least the conversation, the narrative is tilting towards, inclusion of all skin shades. And in
yeah.
India, more than 60% of us are what you can call as dark, brown skin shades, browner, darker
Yes.
versions of the light skin that we get, the brown skin.
Yeah.
So I think the conversation is tilting. And to to be honest, when we started the Dark is Beautiful campaign, yes, we did feel like we were sort of pointing our fingers at the rest of the world,
Yeah.
saying that you are. But as we started doing the campaign and started looking inside of ourselves, in I can speak for myself for sure that doing the campaign has been cathartic for me.
Yeah.
And so it has challenged my own biases with skin color, and of course even with regard to gender bias,
Of
because
course.
we have been conditioned to think a certain way.
Mm.
And and it just shows in the way we behave towards other women. It shows in the way we behave towards people who are darker, than I am.
Mm.
So it is there, and it's really, what is it? Sometimes very depressing to see. Oh my God, I am biased myself, and
Yes.
so. I had to receive the message of the campaign myself, that the toxic belief that measures a person's worth based on the color of their skin, because we've seen this affect the way people behave towards each other. And so I had to challenge myself. I can't say I'm not biased.
Yes.
I am
Yeah.
biased, but I'm getting there along with you. But
Absolutely.
I have recognized that this is not right.
Yes.
So yeah. So from there, let me just say that where has this taken us? Definitely, the conversation has tilted, but we have a lot more work to do. What we're doing
Absolutely.
is just a drop in the ocean. And I keep saying that we need several other campaigns. And one of the successes of the Darkest Beautiful campaign is the fact that it has had a cascading effect. So students began to write to us, and people began to um, write research papers on
Yeah.
this,
Great.
and several other campaigns started following the Darkest Beautiful campaign, because people would write to me and say, what can you help us? I'm like, I cannot help you. You do something yourself in your context. So
Yes.
that's what people began to do.
And that's what we
And
need.
yeah, yeah, and the Advertising Standards Council of India, which is sort of like a body that decides the approval of ads and the
Yeah. Okay.
narrative in ads. For the first time ever, they came up with guidelines for advertising whitening products. And the interesting thing is that
Oh.
every multinational brand that is here in India, or I think now in any context, and especially in Asia, they always have a whitening,
Yes. Right.
sort of a line of products and grooming products. It used to be only for women. Now it's also for men. And even brands that do these, what is it, self-worth messages
Yes.
and public announcements, service announcement videos or films, they also have whitening products on the
Yeah.
in
Wow.
our shelf, and that really bothers me. And when we wrote to them, they said, they didn't answer. so
Oh.
so yeah, but at least some conversations are taking place. What we
Exactly.
were really blessed by is that media took our course, and we were interviewed by media in over 18 different nations, and
Wow.
all the mainline media here took our message and they spoke, and that really helped us. And that was part of what caused The Dark is Beautiful to get viral.
Yeah.
And we
Amazing.
had the support of, yeah, Nandita Das, who's an actor here, who is dark skinned, and she
Yes.
always used to get those questions. How come you're an actor? How come you're so confident despite being dark, and so on?
Wow.
So she lent her voice to our campaign. And so I think it's definitely created sort of an awareness. We've made a noise about it, and
Yeah.
brands
Great.
are waking up to that people are realizing what it is. And the now gen is not going to take all this blatant colorism that is out there.
Yes.
And yeah, so,
And
but
that's
yeah,
what
we
we've
have a long way to go
Yeah,
yet.
and that's what we've got to do, right? You just got to keep on pushing, keep on doing one step in front of the other, and the pendulum will keep
Absolutely.
swinging, and change will eventually occur, even if it's one step at a time.
Absolutely.
We're running out of time, but
Absolutely.
just to close, you're coming as a part of as a keynote speaker for the Advancing Women Flourish conference. What kind of message are you hoping to bring to that conference? Just as we close.
Oh wow, I wish I can say that in 30 seconds,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm really excited to be there to learn first of all about what's happening there, and yeah, on from my part, I would want to sort of emphasize on how sisterhood is so crucial,
Amazing.
and being a good neighbor, women to women, and men are so important to the conversation. So I'm not just coming there for the women, I'm
Of
coming for
course.
the men too.
Yeah, of course. And I think, regardless, whoever you are, you're going to learn a lot from
Yes.
Kavita. So make sure
Yes.
you get along to that conference because it'll be a good one for sure. Hey, we've run out of time, Kavita, but I just want to thank you so much for coming on Table Talk and sharing your wisdom and insights and for all the wonderful work you do for women everywhere, for minority groups, and also for just humanity, really, to make this whole world a better place. You're doing your bit. So thank you so much for chatting with me.
Thanks, Leah. Been my pleasure.